Hi, I'm Merce, I'm a classical guitar player and welcome to another video. This video is the second part of how to practice a piece from scratch. In the first part, we talked about all the things that I would recommend you to do, and in the second part, I want to show you more the practical side of it and what is my thought process when I'm practicing a piece, in this case, a short excerpt, otherwise this video would last forever, so that you can have an idea of which things I take into consideration and how the whole practice thing happens. Of course, I don't know this piece, so this video is not going to be how I speed it up or how I get it to a final tempo, but more the first steps and the important decisions that I take for further practice this piece. The music that I chose for this video is a study by Fernando Sor. Is the study number 17 from the Opus 29, one of the most challenging opuses of his studies. And I chose that particularly because it's a quite intricate contrapuntal piece that I think it's gonna give a quite complete overview of the many aspects, not all of them, but many aspects that need to be taken care in classical guitar when you're starting a piece. So as you can see, this study is in C major, is in 2/4, and the section that I'm going to be taking is from the second part. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I see in this beginning is that the bass line needs to be controlled. So the G down here is no problem because it's a fretted note, but the D right here will need to be controlled. So which means that when I go here, and most likely if I play legato, I could make like this, jumping with the thumb before, so that the D does not come under this chord. But knowing the articulation of this etude, hence it's important to have some style knowledge, it should be articulated everything short. Aside from the counting here, make sure that I enter in the last beat of the bar. Then we have this run here that goes like all this, watching the articulation from the first page, then I would know that the first 8 note should be a bit longer, and then everything else shorter, which gives me different solutions, different ideas more than solutions. I could do the D open and take care of the articulation with the right hand, something like that. Now here, of course, you can probably tell, I have to be careful with actually letting this G on top sound much longer. So let's see how that would go. Now, how I would like to think this when I study is just as a staccato scale. Therefore, in my scale guide, one of the practice is also to practice the legato and detached or staccato articulation. So in this case, we have long, but then everything short. And it's right hand articulation. Now if I put the G on top, a little bit better. Something like this. Now, if I don't want to be worrying that the D is resounding, I could have a choice also to play it fretted. Maybe I would do that just because I would probably like a tempo, the type of impulse that that would give me, but this is just a very personal choice. Okay, so the fingering would go like that. Now, I will be writing all the fingering or most of the fingering so that you can follow, but a line like this, I would probably not write the fingering. And you have to excuse me here, I just said the opposite. I want to do this with the 4th finger. Okay. Now when I get to this D, together with the G that was sounding from before, I have to make sure that I take it out from when it comes next. So we have da, pop, we have this drop. Otherwise, well, it's the same note, it could sound, it will not sound dissonant, but I think that Sor actually really intended to have this da, pop, this type of weight. So I would make sure that I take the pressure off the third when I play the D open. And the same goes for the second D. In the second time, we have a silence, a rest in here. Now on the second beat, we have this arrival. And then on the bass line, instead of the drop D, we will have this pickup. So in this case, we don't have to worry about stopping this D because there is the same D immediately after. Now in this bar that starts with the F natural, I do like to make some sort of apoyando in here because there is this very clearly written that he doesn't want much resonances happening. And you know that when we play notes, there is this sympathy resonances and all this story. So in order to avoid that, I would just put, I will make a rest stroke here and I would lean the thumb to also stop the other ones. Okay, I already see that this part, I will have some fingering options to think about. I think for me, natural would come the idea of doing 1 and then 4, 2, open string, and then I would have 2 and 4 for this with the 1 behind, and then I would slide back. But it could be also a good idea to have the barré, and then we have 3, 1, 4, but you need to make sure that you stop the second string so we don't have this dissonance, and you just put the finger a little bit flatter, and then the second with the 3. For my pinky finger, having this flat and then having to curl this one in is not something I most likely enjoy doing a tempo. So I would, yeah, I would do that. So these are the options to have my fingering. I'll continue with the blue. We have 1 and then 4, 2, open, and then 4, 2, and then the 1 right here. The other option, for those who might like it, they could do a bar chord right there, and instead we would have 3, 1, 4, and 2 and 3 instead, and then 1 also. Okay, so that would be option 2. I will of course go on with my option because that's the point of the video. And in this case, I just need to make sure that with the second finger, I stop the B, the second on the second string. So I stop this B right there. And then I'll just continue. Now here is interesting because it happens a little bit of a similar story. I am here. We need the E to keep sounding until this D. I will put the fourth finger flat so that I can stop this E right there. And I will also use the same technique to dump everything. Otherwise, look all the resonances that are left if I don't stop them. The sixth string and the fourth are ringing like crazy. And then nothing, very, very simple, straightforward, just dumping here the E when it's needed. And of course, this open string here in the E cannot go over the D. Otherwise, we have again the same situation we had before with this second dissonant. you see here in my right hand, we have, and I go immediately to stop the 6. So let's continue from there. Okay, so here we have, of course, well, some options, but I think they're a little bit too silly to be considered. So we have this. Well, we could do that. And then this. But I think in speed that would really not feel very, very nice. Plus, I'm not gaining anything different doing this than coming with a C in here and having it there. So I think the best option is to go right there like this. And then we could have, or like before, this E open and B open right there. Or, given that we had this change here with a C on the 3rd string, maybe I think I would go with the 3rd finger instead to have a little bit more homogeneous color. So 1 and 3. So the passage would look like that. And it helps me also to take care of this line. And then the drop again, like the octave drop like we had before. So we can kind of follow and resemble a little bit the same idea like we had. Also, the fact that we change, we could it could help the articulation as well if we do want to preserve the same articulation like before, which I certainly would. This issue of the articulation is something that I would note down for me to practice further, but now we just go through the piece and I kind of talk about everything, and that would be what I would do, let's say, on my practice sessions. So if we continue from there, we left with a E and a B there and the A sounding. Then we have this G sharp, F sharp, back to G sharp. And when you have this type of movements like this, you could also try to just use this hinge barre, I think it's called in English, or fake barre, however you want to call it. But just use the bottom part of your finger to move. So you actually have a smoother transition. It's just a technical, let's say, tip there. Well, we have to make sure that we stop the bass in the right moment on the 2nd G sharp. And then, well, let's start the next story. The basses are going to be one topic, so I already write all of them. The basses will need to be controlled throughout because we have all these open strings. So there is that. Now, I think on the upper line, we're gonna have some interesting polyphonic going on as well. So let's see what we do. Now, here we could do either this or this. So moving the 2nd or changing position. It's also pretty smooth. Could be an option, but then you will need to cross, let's say, the fingers here. It's a feasible option, but sometimes I would even start to consider fingerings like, instead of this, having to jump from here, I would cut it off. I would even consider this. I'm weird, it's a very to say standard fingering, but these kind of things I would need to practice them and see that if in speed they actually come. Maybe when I get to this passage in here, there is no way I can contract the hand that much, and then I would look to the other solution. And if the other solution I wouldn't like it because it's too jumpy, which in a slow tempo feels good. Maybe eventually I would be settling for the one with a little position change and then the crossing fingers right there. That will depend also what comes after. We could even do this, but you don't want to force too much this kind of movements. That makes it very tiring. And in a very difficult study, you do want to avoid unnecessary movements that are not really giving you anything more musically and will just make your hand very tired. So after we've got this formula, that is going to be repeated also here. So most likely we'll need some fingering that kind of assimilates one to the other, because like this is much easier to preserve the same type of articulation and movement. So this section is mentally quite tricky because you have the bass that you need to take care of, and you also need to take care of the upper line, which has these longer 8 notes, and then the middle voice playing in between. And then on top of that, the very last note, it really needs to be alone, because it couldn't be more clear that we need to have the bass and the first voice silent by that moment, by that G. And make sure that we have, because after we have, so what I think I would do in here is have the change after the first 8 notes of this bar with the A on the bass. Why? Because this kind of staying in position and then changing here, it makes the work a little bit easier for me because I have like 2 blocks and I can clearly distinguish them. And then the next one, making sure that the bass gets stopped right there, and also the melody. So I don't know if you can see from the camera, but I'm lifting up this C in there. Now from there we find this very nice movement that we had before, and now the middle voice is going to do this. So we probably a fingering like this would work. And of course make sure you stop the A, so that we can play it alike. And that's also one of the reasons why I said it would be nice to stay here, because we can make this line sing and then hear the same. So having this, as you can see, I tried already not to write the fingerings and remember them. That's such a good exercise you can do. So do try to write only what you keep forgetting, what it really can help, but avoid writing all the fingerings. Now in this next section we will find on the upper voice what before we had on the middle voice, this tirorim. So let's see how we do that. I think fairly simple. You must make sure though that you dump everything. I think the dumping in such piece is what really makes it very hard. Then the next step, it resembles what we had before. Let me put this in color, this tiridum, tiridum. And also let me point this one out. You see these elements, what I said in the previous video, that I like to color or mark the motifs and where they appear and how they appear. So that's exactly what I meant. And then the blue one. And then we have again the yellow, like we had before. See, it's the same fingering. So that's nice. Of course, now for instance, a passage like this, even these 4 bars, I think would be too messy for me to just play it through and try to deal with the basses and try to preserve the different motifs and all these interchanging voices. So I would focus on these elements and practice them until somehow my fingers go automatically to this damping. And that's something very useful to do in the beginning, because the damping kind of, you need to think about it, but once you do it in the early stages, at least for me, what happens is that it gets fixed very, very deeply, and then I don't need to think about it. So you could definitely try, but if I would try even 2 bars at once, most likely the dumping of the bass line and everything would become a mess even after many, many, many attempts. So try to be smart and really try to find how to make yourself more efficient and which is the way you digest music the best. So this would be for me the very first impression of starting to read the piece. As I mentioned, for the articulation choices and everything, I would do the steps that I mentioned in the previous video of scanning the piece, of reading a little bit what's going on in the story, so that then when I get to the instrument, I can take more informed decisions. Ideally, you want to consider always technique in favor to music, and would be great if you could have an understanding of the piece that you are going to play. Not just that you have heard it a million times, but that you understand the music and that you have scanned the piece previously, so that you have an idea of the style characteristics, of the type of expression that it needs, and to avoid treating Baroque music romantically or the opposite. Knowing a composer, knowing a style will help you very much to make these decisions on fingering, because ultimately the fingering that you use should always help you with articulation, and articulation will make the musical outcome. So everything, it's interconnected, and that's basically what I wanted you to see with this very short part of a study of SOAR. And feel free to write in the comment box your impressions about the video, about if it was helpful, if it gave you new ideas, if maybe it made you realize that you're very far away from this type of practice, or maybe not, maybe very close. Just let me know in the comment box. I will be happy to read you and very curious to know what's cooking in here. And again, feel free to like, subscribe, and share the video if it brought you value. I wish you a very nice week, practice well, and I'll see you in the next one.